Hello, welcome. Ryan and Cars. There's one topic that I haven't talked about yet, um, and it's kind of important, I guess, especially dealing with cars, because there's something that everybody has to deal with cars, whether you are a mechanic or not a mechanic, whether you like cars and don't like cars. Everybody has to go through the buying process of a car. Selling's different, but the buying process of a car. I think I'll just go through, buying a new car. Haggling with people on the side of the road or in their driveway or whatever is kind of different. But dealing with a dealership is kind of it's daunting for a lot of people. It was for me when I first had to go in and well, I shouldn't say that. It wasn't really daunting. I thought going in it would be simple and easy, just like buying a car off of a person who's selling their used car, sort of thing, right? It wasn't until I sold Toyotas and they put us through their sales process, right, on how to sell these cars. And it was the form that all dealerships had adopted. And it was, I forget what they call it, low pressure sales or something like that. But it's a way for them to make the customer feel like, they're being heard and taken care of through the sales process rather than, um, hard nosing and hardballing them kind of thing. But it all ended with the same results as this low pressure sales is basically high pressure sales just wrapped up with patience rather than a big push on time, like that was the big difference. So when you're looking for a new car, let's say you know what you want and you go to a dealership and you don't shop around or anything, and you just walk in, you say, hey, I want to buy that car. They're just going to write it up as market value. You're, you may sit there and wonder, how come I'm not getting anything off on this? Because other people do. Before you know it, you're in the sales office or the financing office, financing a fully priced car with no haggling done on it, right? And for some people, that's fine. You know, some people are wondering, how come no discount? How come they didn't throw anything in? Or maybe you went during a rebate thing where they've lowered the price of the car a certain amount, or you got a thing in the mail from. I just got one from Dodge Jeep Chrysler Ram, you know, sales event, and they give you $500 off or $1,000 off or something like that. Um, which on a domestic is um, an embarrassing. It's an embarrassing. It's an insult. So let me put it this way: not all cars are sold the same. I shouldn't say that. Not all cars have the same. Um, I'm not going to say markup because it's not really a. Is it a markup? I'll say wiggle room. From what the dealership needs to make, like that car lands on the lot, and the next day somebody comes in to buy it. Um, there's a bottom line that they have set out so that the dealership makes the barest minimum amount of profit on that car. And then there's a whole bunch of wiggle room to the sales price, which is should be around the MSRP. The price of the car will not always match the MSRP. Sometimes it'll be lower, sometimes it'll be higher. Sometimes it is what it is. Most of the time it is what it is, and they'll write the number of the MSRP on the sales uh, ticket form thing. And then they'll add on whatever additional things they have to do to meet their state, provincial requirements, right? In the old days, it used to be block heater, but there, you get tire tax and things. I think you get air tax in Florida and stuff like that. Okay, so the barest minimum price that the dealership needs to sell the car to the MSRP or whatever they're selling the car, advertising the car for, telling you that they're selling it for, that's the wiggle room. And that's what I'm going to talk about is the wiggle room. Because you can't go lower than what the dealership needs to make money. The lowest, like if they absolutely have to get rid of a car and it's never been registered, it's still a new car, and they want to discount it as much as possible, like all that they can is that lowest price. And you won't be able to get lower than that. I shouldn't say that, but there's rare cases that you can, and it does have to do with the rebates. But I'll talk about that later. So this wiggle room. Now, if the car you're looking at is an import, Honda, Toyota, Subaru, Mazda, Nissan, Kia, Hyundai, like those kinds of cars. If it's not a Dodge or a form of a Dodge, and I actually think Alfa Romeo is a domestic. I might be wrong about that. I don't know, but that's just a guess. Anyway, so Dodge, Jeep, Chrysler, Ram, Ford, Lincoln, Mercury, if it still exists, GMC, Chevy, Buick. Okay, those are the domestics, right? So the domestic vehicles, like cars that are built in North America, sold in North America, they have the highest or the largest amount of wiggle room. Okay, so for instance, let's take a Ram truck. There's probably about $20,000, close to, look, this is Canadian, okay? So those trucks sell for $70,000. There's probably about $20,000 of wiggle room. Yeah, they sell between 65 and $70,000. Okay, so you have to kind of remember this number because the lower the price of the car, the less wiggle room that they'll have. Right? That wiggle room shrinks, right? So let's say this Hornet was 50, the MSRP I think it was 51, 52, 52. Show it on the sticker at some point there. So I could guess that it's probably about $16,000 of wiggle room on that was on my Hornet. Okay. Now I walk across the street, I go to Toyota and I say, show me the RAV4, and they show me a $55,000 or $52,000 RAV4. They're only going to have about 2,000, 15, 16, 1,800, all about, it'll be close to $2,000 worth of wiggle room. That little bit of wiggle room compared to a domestic dealer has, right? Like the import car salespeople and dealerships make far less money on the vehicles they sell than a domestic dealer does. Okay? You have to keep this in mind. And if you don't know that already and it's been an epiphany, Say it in the comments. If you knew about this already, yes. I'm not going to go into the history of why that is. It just is, right? They tax them higher. They tax import cars higher than they tax the the domestic dealers back in the day, I think, because domestic dealers couldn't compete with the really good stuff that was coming from Japan. And they were cutting into their profits. And they still wanted to pump out crappy cars and make a profit in order to compete with the really good Japanese cars. That's basically in a nutshell. So when you go into even BMW, Mercedes, but the higher. So I was selling in 2007, 2006. It was 2006. I was selling Toyotas, and I got to. I don't know what it was, but I was sharing an office with a guy. We both started at the same time, and for whatever reason, people always went to him for these small cars, the Yaris's, the Corollas, the odd Camry, and he was selling a lot of those things for some reason. I don't know. That just connected and it worked, and he was going through them. And on those cars, there was only like $250 worth of wiggle room as profit. And so as a salesperson in that wiggle room, so you get a base amount that's covered, like that bare minimum price for the car. You're you get a commission off of that. Like you get a flat rate off of that sale, and that's counted into the car price. Now, then you get a percent of a commission of whatever's left in the wiggle room. So your incentive is to, as a salesperson, sell the car at full price so that you can maximize your percentage of commission, right? That's the idea. And this is the fight that happens in the sales room when you're saying, I want something cheaper or throw something in. And the salesperson's like, well, we can do this and we can do that. And they'll try to do all sorts of things to keep that wiggle room really large. However, the deal is working, right? And the sales manager actually fights for that as well, right? Because out of that profit, the dealership makes more money, right? Um, and dealerships don't make money selling cars, just so you know. It's that tight now, where they're making, where the dealership is getting, they'll break even on service, right? And selling cars is just kind of like extra profit, to buy donuts. But so yeah, so and when I was working at Toyota, for whatever reason, people kept coming to me for the FJ Cruiser. I don't know. Maybe I was just talking about it or whatever. But the big trucks, the Tundras were new and award winning at the time, and the FJ Cruisers, and I was selling a lot of those. And on the big trucks, fully loaded Tundras, there was about $4,500 wiggle room. Now at the time, those trucks were expensive. They were fully loaded. They were like $62,000 to $64,000 or something like that. I don't know what they are now, but just take that number. So at $60,000, there was $4,000 wiggle room. I went to go buy a Tacoma. I went to test drive and I try to find out and try to buy a Tacoma just to see. It was just they had one on the lot. I just went to go see if I could get it, and I was talking with the sales guy, and he's like, because I had to add on part of a loan or whatever, and I was just like, I need, how much wiggle room in these things now, right? He's like $2,000, and the Tacoma was 54. It was just an SR5. This is in Canadian money. Tacoma SR5, the one up from the work truck base model. It was, the lowest model of a Tacoma, right? And yeah, I think it was like 54,000 or something like that. Anyway, and there was only $2,000. Well, probably 25 or 27 in there. Whereas, you know, you go to Ford and you look at a Ranger and it's on the lot and it costs $55,000. There's probably pretty close to $15,000 of wiggle room there, right? So you cannot go into Subaru or Toyota or Honda or Nissan or Hyundai or Kia and demand $10,000 off the sticker price. It's impossible. There's absolutely no way. Doesn't matter what model you buy. Oh, Genesis. That's right. There's still Genesis, but that you don't actually haggle for. You just order them online, right? But you don't. You will not. Like that's get that out of your head. Those stories of $10,000 off a vehicle come from domestic vehicles only and higher priced domestic vehicles. For a dealership, let's say I went in there. So on the Hornet Owners Forum, there we kind of talked about our you know the deal we got in buying our Hornet, right? A lot of these guys had ordered them ahead of time and had waited for them for almost a year, and then they were delivered, sort of thing, right? And dealers were actually charging more than the MSRP at the time because of this, right? And they were doing that for the RT models too, right? But yeah, a guy, he was in the States, I think. Yeah, he was in the States. No, was he in the States? Okay, I can't confirm that, but there's a story on the forum. A guy went in, and I think he haggled $15,000. Hornets weren't selling. There were piles of them on the lots in the States, and he went in there and actually did what you're supposed to do. Okay, so you don't haggle on a payment. You don't haggle on um, options. You don't haggle on um, colors or anything like that. You have a price in mind, and you stick to that price. Now, this has to be within reason. This is why I just talked about all of this wiggle room, because you can't go in there and demand, like, go into a dealership and say you want $25,000 off a Hornet, right? Well, you could probably sell that, but you don't expect it. You know, the salesman's going to laugh at you. He's going to tell you to go away, which is fine. But it does set the playing field a little bit, I guess. You know, if you go in there and it's somewhat reasonable of a price, like, so this was 50, let's just say this was $55,000. And I went in there and said, yeah, I like that Hornet. I'll buy that if it's 40 grand. That starts the sales process. So then what happens is, okay, the salesman will go, well, write the number down here, and what would you like your monthly payment to be, and how much are you putting down, and gets all these numbers out of you. And then he'll go, I'm going to go fight for you with the manager, right? And I'm on your side. I wanted you to know that I'm on your side. And then this is the song and dance. And then he runs away and he goes to the manager. And you sit there while he's sitting there eating donuts with his manager. It's like, yeah, here's the sheet. And then they'll bullshit about golfing on the weekend, right? Or what happened the other day. And this process is set up for you to sit and wait and stew in your own juices. So if you are going to go buy a car, brand new, and you want a good deal on it, expect to spend a 10-hour day at the dealership. Minimum 5 hours. Depends how badly they need to get rid of that car. Because here's the thing. You're in the dealership, they know you want to buy it, something. The dealership knows that you're there and you're ready to buy, and they don't want you to leave and go to another dealership. And then this song and dance happens. It's called the sales process, right? And you're all on your own. The salesman isn't helping you. Right? He's making you feel good about being there and, you know, burning all this time. That's his job. It's the sales manager's duty to tell that guy how to get this car and this money out of you. You know, go back in there and tell them this. Tell them that, tell them this, and tell them you're working so hard and you're still behind them 100% and that I'm an asshole. That's what the sales manager tells the salesperson. And you'll never get to see the sales manager. Maybe at the very end when the deal is signed and the financing's happening, he'll come out and he'll shake your hand and, hey, you did pretty good. So the salesperson will come back with a number low, maybe lower, maybe not, or with some kind of a deal attached to that high number, saying, well, this is the most that my managers, da, 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 da. And you just say, no, not interested. I want to pay $40,000. And he goes back to a sales manager and you sit and wait. And the more you do this, the longer they get you to sit and wait. This might happen 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times. The the more of the wiggle room you are trying to remove, the longer your wait at the dealership is going to be. Okay? Unless you know a guy. The best way to, like, I mean, no salesperson wants a guy like that who is going to stick hard nose to that $15,000 off of this certain vehicle to get rid of all the wiggle room. Nobody wants to deal with that person. A lot of times, actually, unless they're desperate to sell one of these cars that you're looking at, they will probably tell you to leave. They might do one or two of these rounds with the salesperson where you try to stick to that lowest amount. Then the sales manager will actually tell the salesperson, tell him to leave. Take the deal away and tell him to leave. And that's kind of that's actually a tactic that does work, that gets people to move a little bit more. Um, but a lot of times you like there's like 5%, 10%, I forget the numbers. What was it? Like there's something like 30% of people aren't there to buy that day. There is 10% is like time wasters where they're trying either they're they say they're there to buy a car, but they're just trying to see how much they can get off of the car, and but they're not going to buy. And then there's the rest of the people, 75% or something like. I think that's what I think the majority, 70%. It was like 70. That was the. If anybody's done car sales, like there is a percentage there, and I think it's around 75% of people are, if they're in the dealership, they will leave with a car that day if you package it up right, you know. But usually somebody who's hard nosed at that $40,000 at that the lowest part of the zero wiggle room. Um, Generally speaking, those are the people that the dealership really doesn't want to sell cars to. They'll tell you to leave. They'll they they will lose that sale and send it off to a competitor, right? Depending on how desperate they are to get rid of the cars, right? But the guy in the forum, yeah, he did $15,000, and so I think there's probably around $16,000, $17,000 in this car of wiggle room where it left enough for the dealership to say, hey, yeah, we made more than what we needed and a couple of, few extra $1,000 for your check for your commission for the dealership and a little bit of extra profit, and we got rid of one of these Hornets, right? But you sit there and you say no and you say no and you say no and you say no, and that's what they do. They come in and they say no and they say no and they say no. Like, we'll offer you this, and you're like, no, this is the number I want. Well, they'll come back and give you a bunch of reasons why they can't accept that, and then you'll go back and say, well, then I'm going to leave. And then they'll go, okay, well, let me go talk to my manager. And then they'll come back with a lower number. And then it's like, no, that's not close enough. Like, I really can't do that. I have to go. And, I actually told my wife I wasn't going to be here this long. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to leave the dealership. Maybe I'll come back on Tuesday. Right? And then I go, no, 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 no. Let me go talk to my sales manager. And then you're waiting another hour. And then he'll come back and go, okay, I talked to my manager. I really fought for you in there. I really did this thing. I really, really, really talked to him. You told him about your wife. And we really don't want you to leave without, getting the car of your dreams here today, and want to make you happy and things like that. And then you're like, okay, well, what's the number? And it's getting closer. It's getting a lot closer. And then he's like, okay, let me see this. It's not 40 grand. It's 46 or 47,000, right? Like, he did come down quite a bit, but you know what? What's my monthly payment on that? Oh no, that's too high. I need, he said, I need more, I need, and then then you get to talk about the monthly payment where it's only 1,000 is about $100, and da, da, da. And you're like, times are tough. Every little bit counts. Da, 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 da. I'm gonna go. You guys obviously don't want to sell me the car, you know. You go, what's your lowest, 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 lowest? And then you're right. Well, if they're at 47 and you still at 40, you know, he's like, meet me somewhere there and there. Like, I would like, if you move a little bit, it's okay. Go 42. They'll come back with 44. And the salesman will say, that is the absolute best that my sales manager can do, this and that, and blah, blah, blah. And I fought and da, 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 and I've never seen him go this low on this car, and he's pissed as fuck, and he yelled at me while I was in the whole thing. And then all you got to do is go, okay, you know what? I'll do 42.5, something like that. Because as long as they're getting a little bit of extra money above that, they'll give it to you. They'll give it to you for that low price. So instead of 40, you're paying 43, let's say 40, 42 or 43, right? But you still get that, most of that wiggle room has shrunk. But you can't do that with an imported car, like the import dealers, right? Like the Subarus, like Mercedes, BMW, things like that. What is Chevy's luxury brand? Cadillac. That's right. Cadillac does that too. That's the other domestic. And that's how it works. That's how it works. It like, I can totally see why people have been married to domestic cars. Like, I have a bias here. Like, I really hate domestic cars. I don't think through my lifetime that they have produced really good cars. During my lifetime, the best cars have always been Japanese or European. Just in my opinion. Just in my opinion. It's totally biased, by the way. It's totally biased. I understand that. It's just my personal neural pathway set up in my brain, right? Which is why I love this Hornet. It came as a domestic, but it's 100% European, right? I love that. Whereas if I would have went to the Alfa Romeo dealership, they would have. I actually need somebody to tell me that. If you work at an Alfa dealership, is it the same as? Do they have the same wiggle room as the Dodge dealership? Like, I'm really wondering that, because the financing was the same, and I'd never gone into an Alfa dealership before. But if you're still watching and you're still listening to this, and you bought a Tonale, maybe, um, let me know. Let me know if they have the same markup and stuff, right? Now the thing, yeah, yeah. Then he came back, how much are you going to put down? I'm like, yeah, I need 5,000 down. If I'm going to give you this money, you got to put 5,000 down. I was like, no. What did I get this car for? It was like 40, it was like 47,000. Because with my extra 5 grand that I had on the BMW tacked on top, it came to pretty close. It came pretty close to what the MSRP sticker was. So that would be 46. So if it's 51 something, so 52,000, so 46, 47. Yeah, it was something like that. Because I didn't finance, like the financing number wasn't that big. It wasn't like 70 grand or anything like that. It was 60. The financing thing with, we know how they add on all the interest and all of that for the full loan, and then they break it up into payments. It was like 62, 64 or something like that. Yeah. But I didn't pay. They threw in the taxes and all of that. It was in BC, and there was PST, GST, and it was like, anyway, it was 10%, and all of that was thrown into that number. Like that number was the final number with tax that I got this car for. And I thought it was. They moved a lot on it, considering that it was $3,000 over MSRP. But you know, that's how buying a new car kind of works. It's very time consuming, and it tests your patience, right? Because you end up sitting in a dealership for hours. Like I was at the dealership there. I went there after work. So I was there at about 3:30 or 4. The dealership closed at 6, and I needed to leave with the vehicle that night. They stayed open for my deal. And I left the dealership. I remember I left the deal. No, nobody was there. The salesman actually was the guy who delivered it to me that night, and he had to go in and make sure everything was wiped down. And he pulled the sticker off the window. He just pulled it off. He didn't even clean off the gluey stuff or anything. He threw it on the back seat. He went and ran, filled it up with gas, and then brought me the car and said, "Here you go." We put the plate on it, and it was 9:30 at night. So 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 6 hours or so. Oh no, I worked the early shift and I went there during the afternoon. That's what. That's right. So I would have been off at 1. So 2:30, I would have been, yes, yes. I just rolled in there at about 2:30. That's right. So we're looking at like a full day, a full 8-hour day of that salesman had only me to work with that day. And like I said, it took a long time because I he kept coming back. I kept saying no, and then they would make me sit for an hour or an hour and a half or 45 minutes, you know. And then he'd come back and he'd say something. I'd be like, no, I can't do that. Like I just can't do that. He came back at another time and I said, no, if that's the case, I'm just gonna go buy a real Alfa Romeo. I'll go there tomorrow. And as soon as I said that, I think that was the last thing I said to him. The sales manager came back and it was 48 something, something like that. And he asked, and he said, no, no, no. That's when he asked me to put 5,000 down. He went down to the number that we were at, and he said 5,000 down. And I said, no, if that's the case, I'll go to Alfa Romeo because I've seen on the website I got to put 5,000 down for an Alfa Romeo. If that's the case, I'll go over there and do that. And he's like, okay, okay, okay. Well, how much can you put down? I said, right now, yeah. Anyway, that's how it worked. I actually used that too. to get this car. I threatened to go get a real Alfa Romeo. Anyway, yes, I hope that made sense. It's the sales process. If you haven't been a salesman or a car salesman, it is kind of weird. And it's because, yeah, it's different between the sales process is the same. For you to get $100 or $500 off on a Toyota is the same as trying to get $5,000 off of a Ford. It's the same process. They'll sit and make you wait, sit and make you wait, sit and make you wait. You know, good sales managers know how to get you in and out of there quickly. They'll throw something in, or they'll knock off the price and they'll say, here, sign, and then it's all done. You're in the financing office, right? But when you're trying to get rid of all of that wiggle room, they will make you work for it. And it can be done. It can be done. There's the same thing with the guy on the farm that I was talking about earlier. He got something like $15,000 off his Hornet. And that's what he said. I just sat there. He kept giving him the same number, kept giving him the same number, and he wasn't going to leave. He wasn't going to leave until he got that number. And they wanted to get rid of the Hornet, so they gave it to him for that price, right? They're not going to do that for everybody. If they get 10 people coming in, they're doing that for that month for that same car. They're actually going to say no to all of them. That car will just sit then. Because here's the other problem on the other end of the dealership side, because the longer the car sits, the more expensive it is for them. They want to sell the cars immediately as they land. Your best bet is, like, if you see that car trailer the day before and they're unloading cars into the dealership, your best bet is to go that next day and make a deal on a car, because that's the cheapest that they can give it to you. That first month. If it sits more than a month, they now have to get you to their wiggle room. Their wiggle room shrinks as well, because their overhead on that car becomes higher the longer the car sits there. It's not like you think it sits there and they want to get rid of it for cheaper just to blow it out the door. It doesn't work like that on car dealerships. The longer cars stay at a car dealership, the more expensive they are to get rid of, right? And they eventually, if they sit too long, especially with Dodges, because they have too many of them all over the place, they start selling them at a loss, or they send them to the auction or things like that. They won't sell them to people for a giant discount. They'll wait for Dodge to give in the rebates. And now here's the rebate thing. So manufacturer rebates, they will set. We had this at Toyota where there would be $1,000 on these vehicles and $2,000 on these vehicles. So you had the wiggle room. Plus, as a salesman, you had the wiggle room, the $2,000, let's say, wiggle room on a car. But then you had a rebate of $2,000. So you could actually if you knew a friend and he had to buy a car, that was the best time for him to come, because then you could give him 2,000, take off almost everything off of all the wiggle room, and then let's say 1,000, just throw in the rebate and then offer him another $500 off, and he's still making $1,500 on the car, but he's getting a lower price on paper than what you guys can actually sell it for, than what a dealership can sell it for. That's how the rebate thing works. So you can sell a car. So let's say the car is advertised at $30,000 and there's a $2,000 manufacturer's rebate on it, and there's $2,000 wiggle room. So yeah, if it's advertised at $30,000, the car needs to sell at the lowest at $28,000 in order for the dealership to make their money. But now with the rebate, they get paid by the manufacturer on that car an extra $2,000. So, but the dealership can also use that as an incentive to sell the car even further. So you can go in and ask for $2,000 off, and their lowest price, let's say, is $28,000, but you can actually get the car less than that. You can go down to 26 even with that rebate. If the dealership wants to make absolutely nothing on that car, let's say you're a friend, which has happened to me, and you get it priced lower than the dealer can sell it to anybody else at any other time. It's weird, but it works, and it does happen. Um, I had a friend who was selling Hondas. That's how I got my first Honda. He's like, yeah, you know what? We're not going to haggle. Here's the price. I'll just take it to my manager, your buddy, blah, blah, blah. And we did that from a minivan. And then the second minivan, I went in there. It was a new sales manager. And he's like, Oh, you knew this guy? I said, yeah. And he's like, okay, I'll do the same deal he did. Here you go. Because we had the car service there the whole time, the whole thing, right? The dealership made money off of us, and it was good. So if you get good deals and you keep buying the same car, I think that's why a lot of people go to domestic cars because they get this. Either they get a giant amount off the car and they feel like they got a really good deal, or they get a bunch of stuff thrown in for free and they feel like they got a really good deal, and they keep going back. And because the dealership knows them, they'll just give them a good deal, keep giving them a good deal every time they go in. It's the best way to have repeat business, right? But that's the nutshell on buying a new car. Used cars is a little bit different because you don't have to sit and wait 8 hours. If you're buying a used car, have cash. Anyway, it's 40 minutes long. It's taking too long. Thanks for sticking around this long. Like and subscribe. Hope this helps somebody out. If you have a story, leave it in the comments because um, these car buying stories and these dealership stories and stuff, not a lot of people have a lot of experience with this. And the more information you can give here, rather than watching some bland YouTube video, um, they can read it in the comments. People will scroll for information in the comments. All right. Thank you very much. You're appreciated. I'll see you on the next one.